Good evening. This is Atheist History Week, and I'm John Rafferty, President of the Secular Humanist Society of New York, and also a proud and active member of New York City Atheists, which produces this show. Atheist History Week, this show, looks at events in history that have to do with atheism or free thought, skepticism, rationalism, agnosticism, whatever you have ism that has to do with free thought. And we look at people and their birth dates or death dates or the dates that they accomplished something, the famous, the not so famous, even the infamous. And we look also at events that took place, treaty signings or in national and international conventions of free thinkers, and other important dates, including, of course, those religious fun and games like witch trials and burnings at the stake. One of the most important events in free thought, and those of you who are regular watchers of this show know I keep harping on the same thing because I think it's important. On September 17th in 1787, the United States Constitution was adopted by 39 of the 55 delegates to the Second Convention. And why is that important in the history of free thought? Because what is not regularly understood is that this was not only a political statement, it was really a free thought statement. It begins in the famous words, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union," and then goes on to explain, "We, the people, not by virtue of our allegiance to God, not under the leadership of Jesus Christ or Muhammad or anybody else. The first government compact in the history of Western civilization that relied upon the authority of we, the people." God is not mentioned once in the entire Constitution, no matter what the right wing and Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia will try to tell you. He ain't there. September 11th, 1787, the adoption of the U.S. Constitution. Let's jump forward 200 years. One of the sports heroes of our times is Lance Armstrong. Lance Armstrong, who has won the Tour de France, the most grueling bike race in the world, and has won it not only once but several times, and including winning it after he survived testicular cancer of the testicles. When he was diagnosed, I should mention his birth date, why he's this week, September 18th, 1971. Lance Armstrong was born in Plano, Texas. He was an athlete from a very early age, and was an amateur competitor right through the 1992 Olympic Barcelona Games. He was the number one ranked cyclist in the world when, at the age of 25, he was diagnosed with advanced testicular cancer, which had spread to his lungs and brain. 5 months after the diagnosis, following 2 surgeries, including brain surgery and aggressive chemotherapy, he was not only alive, he was back on his bike. And soon after founded the Lance Armstrong Foundation to benefit cancer research, to promote early detection, and to help cancer survivors. In all, he won the Tour de France 7 times, probably a feat that will probably never, ever be equaled. And through it all, as he has written in his autobiography, "It's Not About the Bike, My Journey Back to Life." Through it all, he relied on his own deep well of reserves, and unconditional support of family and friends. I hoped hard, he wrote. I wished hard, but I didn't pray. I don't have anything against organized religion per se, he told Time magazine when they interviewed him in 2003. We all need something in our lives. I personally just have not accepted that belief, but I'm one of a few. I'm not a big fan of cycling. Not many Americans are. But his book was fascinating, and I excerpted it from it for an issue of Peak, the newsletter of the Secular Humanist Society, back a couple of years ago, when that part of it which would be of interest to secular humanists and freethinkers. The night before brain surgery, Armstrong wrote, I thought about death. I searched out my larger values and I asked myself, if I was going to die, did I want to do it fighting and clawing or in peaceful surrender? What sort of character did I hope to show? Was I content with myself and what I had done with my life so far? I decided that I was essentially a good person, although it could have been better, but at the same time, I understood that the cancer didn't care. I asked myself what I believed. I had never prayed a lot. I hoped hard. I wished hard, but I didn't pray. I had developed a certain distrust of organized religion growing up, but I felt I had the capacity to be a spiritual person and to hold some fervent beliefs. Quite simply, I believed I had a responsibility to be a good person, and that meant fair, honest, hardworking, and honorable. If I did that, if I was good to my family, true to my friends, if I gave back to my community or to some cause, if I wasn't a liar, a cheat, or a thief, then I believed that should be enough. At the end of the day, if there was indeed some body or presence standing there to judge me, I hoped I would be judged on whether I had lived a true life, not on whether or not I believed in a certain book or whether I'd been baptized. If there was indeed a God at the end of my days, I hoped he didn't say, but you were never a Christian, so you're going the other way from heaven. If so, I was going to reply, you know what, you're right, fine. I believed, too, in the doctors and the medicine and the surgeries. I believed in that. I believed in them. A person like Dr. Reinhorn, his oncologist, a person with the mind to develop an experimental treatment 20 years ago that now could save my life. I believed in the hard currency of his intelligence and research. His thought, Lance Armstrong's thoughts, the night before the surgery that might or might not save his life. It all boiled down a couple of years later when he was interviewed in by ET magazine, and he said, remember, testicular cancer, he said, if there was a God, I'd still have both nuts. Lance Armstrong, born September 18th, 1971, and still going very strong. Born September 18th in 1922, Catherine FAHRINGER, she was raised as an Episcopalian, and when she married and had children of her own, family members urged her to teach religion to her children. Then her military husband was in England, where they moved, and she dutifully purchased the Golden Book of Bible Stories. And she started reading it. Now remember, of course, the Golden Book would tone down a lot of the bloodshed and the misogyny and of the Bible for little children. But even there, as she started reading the stories to her children, she thought, wait a minute. And she said to her husband, I can't teach this stuff to my kids. I'm nicer than God. That is a quote from an interview with San Antonio newspaper. She hooked up with the Freedom from Freedom from Religion Foundation in 1987, and created and hosted Free Thought Forum, a regular cable TV show still on the air in San Antonio. She has worked very extensively in Freedom from Religion Foundation, and she even managed to persuade then Governor Ann Richards of Texas and city officials to make proclamations about free thought in Texas. Wow. She got a lot of attention when she went on the Sally Jesse Raphael show once, where she was a regular on the show, but she quipped about rejecting the idea of the big spook in the sky. That got a lot of reaction. She said in an interview with a San Antonio newspaper in 1991, "We would be 1,500 years ahead if it hadn't been for the church dragging science back by its coattails and burning our best minds at the stake." Catherine FAHRINGER, born September 18th, 1922. Born September 19th, in 1913 in Seattle, Washington, was Frances Farmer. Maybe the smartest person who was ever a movie star, which none of us remember now because she never got she was briefly a star, but her free thought activity, atheist activity, was just frowned upon by not only the studio executives, but by the gossip columnists in the newspapers of the times in the 1930s and 1940s. Even as a high school junior at the age of 16, she won a creative writing contest with her essay entitled "God Dies," quote unquote. That not only won her a prize, but it won her national attention, because newspapers picked up the stories all over about the pretty blonde 16-year-old who wrote that God's dead. Wow. Seattle girl denies God and wins prize, one of the headlines. About becoming an atheist, she wrote in that essay, about that essay later on, "I felt rather proud to think that I had found the truth myself without help from anyone. It puzzled me that other people hadn't found it too." She was, because of her notoriety, supposedly the talent scout found her, but her picture had been all over the papers, and gorgeous blonde. And so she moved to Hollywood, signed a contract with Paramount, and married I think he was an actor, Leif Erikson, and she starred in movies with Bing Crosby, and she played the lead in another movie called Come and Get It, and then the studio was controlling her, so she ran off to New York to star in the Clifford Odets play Golden Boy, and when she went back to Hollywood, they gave her supporting actress roles. And she had a problem with alcohol, real problem with alcohol. Which came first, who knows? The disappointment at the career led her to start to drink, or the career went down because she was drinking, or was it a spiral? Probably. But at any rate, she was arrested for drunk driving, and she was in and out of courts for drunk driving and that kind of thing. And part of her problem, and this is very well documented in the movie called Frances, that was made about her life, starring Jessica Lange in 1982, was that she was considered half nuts just because she was an atheist, and an outspoken atheist. And, you know, I think that she had an attitude, I may be a drunk, but I'm also right. And her mother was given control over her by the courts, and she was put in a sanitarium by her mother where she was given shock treatment and even, not proven, but it's pretty well surmised, a lobotomy to supposedly cure her of her alcoholism. She finally got out. She did some TV work, but she never came back all the way, and she finally died of cancer of esophagus in 1970. Life that was, if not ruined by, helped ruin by the attitudes towards free thought in Hollywood and in the nation at large. In that essay, at the age of 16, she wrote, "I wondered a little why God was such a useless thing. It seemed a waste of time to have him. After that, he became less and less for me until he was nothingness." On September 20th in 1878, Upton Sinclair was born in Baltimore. He said later on that his two heroes when he was a child were the anti-clerical poet Shelley and Jesus Christ. He soon grew out of that one. He was already working for newspapers when he was in college at CCNY in Columbia, and making a living writing for newspapers and paying for his education that way. In 1906, he wrote a novel that changed America. He wrote a novel called The Jungle. And what it was based on his investigation of the meatpacking industry. And most Americans had no idea of the filthy conditions and the crap that was put into the food, the meat that they were eating. We spoke last week about Jessica Mitford's American Way of Death, which woke up the whole country to the abuses of the funeral industry in America in the 1960s. Well, in 1906, The Jungle was an even bigger number. And it was responsible for a presidential inquiry by the Theodore Roosevelt administration, and resulted in the passage of the Pure Food and Drugs Act and the Meat Inspection Act of 1906. In terms of free thought, Upton Sinclair never really lost his admiration for the moral teachings of Jesus, but he was also, he couldn't help himself from investigating fraud and BS. And in his book, The Prophets of Religion, an essay in economic interpretation in 1918, he wrote, "This book is a study of supernaturalism from a new point of view, as a source of income and a shield to privilege." He explained how every church and every religion was a money-making scam. He was an active socialist who ran for public office many times, never won. And he was one of the first people in America to wake up the American public to the dangers of Nazism. Died in 1968. "There are a score of great religions in the world," he wrote, "and each is a mighty fortress for graft." Upton Sinclair, born September 20th, 1878. We don't know the exact birth date of the Irish patriot and infidel Robert Emmet, but we certainly know that he died on September 20th in 1803. at the age of about 25. He was born into a Protestant family, graduated from Trinity College, joined the United Irishmen. There was a huge Irish rebellion supported by the revolutionary French government in 1798, but the British crushed the revolution, and Emmet ran to France, where he became a deist, eventually met Napoleon and Talleyrand, and went back to Ireland and organized another uprising, again aborted, and in 1803, and he was condemned to death. On his way to the gallows, in typical Irish fashion, the priest was wheeled out and was ready to give him absolution, and Emmet called out on his way to the scaffold that he was an infidel by conviction. Guts, certainly had. Robert Emmet, Irish patriot and infidel, died September 20th, 1803. 21 in 1866, H.G. Wells was born. Herbert George Wells. He was born to a working class family in Kent, in England, of course, and he didn't get much of an education, in and out of schools, interrupted by illnesses and family difficulties, and he became an apprentice to a draper, somebody who worked with yard goods, fabrics, and but the headmaster of the Midhurst Grammar School, where he had managed to spend a year, recognized something in the young man, and arranged for him to return as what was called an usher, a student teacher, because he thought that this was a young man who would benefit from more education. And Wells not only did, he earned a scholarship in 1844, and he studied biology under Huxley at the Normal School of Science. And he earned his bachelor's and his doctor's science degrees. And after marrying his cousin Isabel, he began to supplement his teaching salary with short stories and freelance articles, then books. And then we come to the H.G. Wells that we all know, the man who wrote The Time Machine, The Island of Dr. Moreau, The Invisible Man, and The War of the Worlds. And just those 4 novels, how many movies have they engendered? A dozen? I don't know how many times. The War of the Worlds has been done at least 3 times. The Island of Dr. Moreau, 2 or 3 times. The Time Machine and The Invisible Man, both done 2 or 3 or 4 times. Wells was a man well ahead of his time. He was an advocate of free love, big deal in the late 19th century and early 20th century. He had an affair with Margaret Sanger, about whom we spoke last week, and a 10-year relationship with the author Rebecca West, with whom he had 2 out-of-wedlock children. And by the way, this was all after he had divorced that cousin and married a student. In today's world, he wouldn't have been able to keep his teaching job, that's for sure. But he probably was an incredibly... H.G. Wells could write faster than you and I could read, and his outline of history and short history of the world, The Shape of Things to Come, which also became another movie, or at least the title did, and he just kept turning them out, and he became internationally famous, and he used his international fame to promote causes like pacifism and world government, and he wrote in an experiment in autobiography in 1934, Indeed, Christianity passes. Passes, it is gone. It has littered the beaches of life with churches, cathedrals, shrines, and crucifixes. Prejudices and intolerances like the sea urchin and starfish, and empty shells and lumps of stinging jelly upon the sands here after a tide. A tidal wave out of Egypt, and it has left a multitude of little wriggling theologians and confessors and apologists hopping and burrowing in the warm, nutritious sand. But in the hearts of living men, what remains of it now? Doubtful scraps of Arianism, phrases, sentiments, habits. H.G. Wells, born September 21, 1866.
Wherever we once were, we are no longer a Christian nation, at least not just. We are also a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, and a Buddhist nation, and a Hindu nation, and a nation of non-believers.